Manhattan, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the organizers for asking me to come along and say a few words about the waterfronts of New York. And I'll start my story with the recently published strategy document from the Mayor's Office of New York, Vision 2020 for the waterfronts, because that sets out a far-reaching vision and encompasses the Mayor's recent theme, which is the waterfronts, the sixth borough of Manhattan. And it is a serious effort to look forward at what can be achieved around what is the longest shoreline around any city in the world of something over 800 kilometers. And that is a continuation of efforts that have been going on for more than 12 years to improve the waterfronts around Manhattan. And our firm has been fortunate in being involved, as you can see in the map there, of something like 14 kilometers of nearly continuous waterfront stretching down the west side along the Hudson River from about 56th Street and then all the way around, Hudson River Park, part of Battery Park, and the waterfronts close to that, and then the East River waterfront on the east side, and then going up to Hunters Point, the brown at the top. And so we've been involved in those projects, and I'm going to just focus on two of them that I know personally and are the largest, and that is Hudson River Park, about 8 kilometers, stretching all the way down the west side, and down at the bottom on the East River waterfront of about 3 kilometers. And so I want to say a few words about a few topics that I think are relevant to this subject. Governance in relation to waterfronts, urban regeneration and economic benefits, program amenities and facilities that can be accommodated, some of the technical challenges we run into, and a few of the design details. So, talking of governance, I'll mention the two quite different models that apply to the two projects I'm dealing with. In the case of East River Waterfront, it is a project where our client is the New York City East Economic Development Corporation, which also holds the contract and acts as the agent for the Mayor's Office and the Department of City Planning in implementing projects like that. So it is a normal city project, and the operation and maintenance will be taken care of by the EDC, probably in the form of contracting out the operation and maintenance. Now, Hudson River Park is a very different and interesting model. As a result of the long history that I'll mention in a little while that eventually led to the consensus of the people involved that something had to be done about that precious stretch of waterfront. The state and the city created Hudson River Park Trust as a semi-autonomous entity. So the Hudson River Park Trust has the mandate to design, build, operate, and maintain the waterfront, and was created in 1998. And it is a single-purpose public benefit corporation in which the mayor of the city and the governor of the state of New York share equally in the power through appointing board members, being responsible for the capital finance, and owning the land. And the Hudson River Park Trust, therefore, is not responsible for the capital funding, but is responsible for the operation and maintenance, mainly from revenues derived from the private sector. And that creates a very interesting model and has many benefits. For instance, it gives a degree of autonomy and flexibility in dealing with issues, and it gives the ability to raise money and operate things, and it frees it with a single purpose of the Hudson River Park, independent of other city considerations. So that is the governance model that we have been working with for the last 10 years now, more than 10 years, on Hudson River Park. So I will start by saying more about that particular situation of Hudson River Park. And it started out with a really derelict situation in the 80s after the collapse of the old West Side Highway, which was a structure that fell into disrepair and collapsed. And as a result of that, there was a long story which ended in a public outcry about the solution that was proposed. And as a result of that, the public won, and this situation that I'm going to describe was created. Now, before that, of course, the west side of Manhattan was a very much celebrated place. In the early 1900s, it was the port of entry and departure for the elite traveling to and from Europe. It was the port of entry for thousands and thousands of immigrants who came to seek their new life. It was a center of industries such as the meat industry, and it was really the place to be. And then suddenly, it wasn't, and it fell apart, and for decades just degenerated, was fenced off, had no access. The piers collapsed, as you can see there. The marine borers came back to life and took care of the timber piles and led to the collapse. And as I say, eventually as a result of that, there was a process that I don't intend going into, which culminated with a very involved public and a decision to create this autonomous entity to rebuild Hudson River Park. And the result has been, it's 8 kilometers long. It is very varied along its length, and it is an estimated project of about 500 million US dollars, of which about 80% has been spent and is built by now, and the public are using it in thousands. So that is the background to where we came in about 11 years ago. And one of the features of what the Trust inherited in this derelict situation was an old seawall of tremendous historic significance, but again in state of disrepair in various places. And the historic interest of the seawall is that it reflects about 60 years of different forms of construction of these kinds of marine structures through the decades. And there are something like 10 different forms of construction. So the New York State Historic Preservation Office became very involved, and it was their job to ensure that whatever was done respected the historic background of the seawall, which extends nearly all of those 8 kilometers. And the other feature of the work that has been done, looking now forward to the present, is to see the tremendous economic benefits of urban regeneration that have happened really in front of our eyes over the last 10 years. Celebrated architects, the two residential towers in the background there by Richard Meyer, buildings by Frank Gehry and other well-known architects, all the way along the length, totally outside of any strategy in developing the park. It was not as though the developers, the Hudson River Park Trust, calculated the economic benefits to be derived or what would happen. They simply proceeded as an act of faith, and in parallel with that, the residents and property developers and others in Manhattan voted with their feet and built fantastic new developments, and as I say, use the park in thousands. And since then, some institutions have tried to do some calculations of the economic benefits, and while I couldn't verify their accuracy, it certainly appears that the benefits in terms of increased value directly attributable to the park are of comparable order to the capital investment that has been put into the park. And so then to say something about what do we do in the park, what are the amenities and facilities and program that drive the whole thing. first of all, it is for the people, and it was for passive and active recreation, not too much formal. And the bikeway is a defining element. It is part of the greenway that already extends nearly all the way around Manhattan, so you can almost ride or walk on the shoreline all the way around Manhattan now. And that is a much used facility that is actually the border between the other major element of program is what you're seeing here, really, and lots of it: passive recreation, opportunities for people who live in the density of Manhattan to simply come there and relax and sit around, lie around, and enjoy it. And these kinds of lawns and gardens and wonderful landscaping are a feature throughout the park. This shows passive recreation, I dare say, and one of the design features of the lighting, which is a derivative of one of the old historical lighting systems in Manhattan. And then in terms of facilities, this is an area of the park towards the north around 50th Street. Apart from a little sculpture garden on the lawn there, in the background is a boathouse, of which there are several at various positions along the Hudson River Park, which enable the canoe and kayaking fraternity to keep their boats and also to gain access to the river. So there's a lot of aquatic sport associated with the park. And at this stage, I'd just like to say something about the process that led to the program decisions on this. Of course, there was a great deal of direct consultation, mainly with the community boards, the various community boards along the 8 kilometers. But of course, they have very self-interests and very local interests, like a priority would be dog runs and children's playgrounds. And the Trust has to balance that immediate need, which can be expressed in meetings very strongly and so on by the residents, with the wider interests of a park that serves not just the residents that can immediately walk there, but the wider residents of Manhattan, of the region, and even international tourists. And that balancing act was very important in coming to the program that has eventually evolved. And that situation applies certainly in Manhattan and in a number of other situations where one is trying to determine program and has residents associations who have very strong views about their own interests, which must be served, of course, as well. So elements of program, you see there on the bottom right, a little sculpture garden. This is the area immediately north of Chelsea Piers, for those of you who know Manhattan. Chelsea Piers is a very active area along Hudson River Park, which is owned by Hudson River Park, but is not part of the development I'm talking about. In fact, it's a long-term lease that produces a significant amount of revenue, has an enormous amount of activity in it, and is not being rebuilt at this stage. But that's right in the background. But slightly before that, you see another piece of lawn, open recreation, a pier that has been rebuilt, and a carousel which is used. Another feature of the program was public art. There was a specific funded program of public art in a number of situations, using the artists to depict issues and of historical relevance at those particular parts along the waterfront. Children's playgrounds, of course, of which there are several. The carousel that I mentioned, which seems to have a great deal of use. Another form of children's playground. And a wonderful skateboard park that I believe the enthusiasts rather like, and it prevents them trying to jump on the walls and benches and everything else, because there's nothing that stops these guys from enjoying themselves. And then at Pier 26, which is down towards the southern end, there you can see elements of program all interwoven into that pier, In the foreground, a miniature golf course. Behind that, a beach volleyball court. Behind that, an open court that can be used for various forms of recreation. And then on the left, a docking area. And between that and the pier that is not on this picture to the left of it, between those two is a basin that is used for boats to be able to tie up. I should also say at this stage, looking at that pier, that Hudson River Park, which has an area of something over 250 hectares, a large part of, and that is the responsibility of the trust, a large part of that area is actually a marine sanctuary that goes right out from the seawall to the pierhead along the whole length. So the trust also has a mandate to look after the marine habitat and improve the marine habitat in the vicinity. More about that a little later too. So that is the miniature golf that I was referring to, the beach volleyball. Then just to mention a few technical issues. The first one being something about sustainability, because we and our client were very concerned about its sustainability from the very beginning, but at a very practical level. And I guess the main issue here was to keep in balance the needs of society, the economic needs, and the environmental needs, and to keep that balance. And one of the first issues of sustainability is, of course, the marine sanctuary that I referred to, and the improvement of the water quality and the marine life. That has been a major push, of which, speaking more globally, the US Army Corps of Engineers and the State Department of Environmental Conservation is responsible for. And a great deal has been achieved over the recent years to improve the quality of the water and of the marine habitat in the Hudson River. And that, as I say, is a responsibility that the Trust shares out to the pierhead line. But in addition to that, what you see here is the longevity issues of sustainability that I think are extremely important in these waterfronts. Our client, who, being the Trust, actually were busy. They had a huge operational entity right there, responsible from day one for maintaining the entire 8 kilometers. So they understood the issues of maintenance. And they understood that in a park, in a public park, if it deteriorates, it likely won't get fixed. And therefore, you have to take a 50-year design life approach to the materials and design features that you have. So from the granite paving and the bluestone detail that goes all the way along the esplanade to the railing on the right, which is a high-quality stainless steel, to the ipe hardwood for benches and other elements. All of that adds up to longevity. Of course, we could have a long discussion about ipe and the sustainability issues, because although this is specifically specified from a proper cared for forest, nevertheless, there is discussion about whether that is truly sustainable or not, but I won't go there. So that's the issues of sustainability, and I want to just touch on a few of the other technical issues. First of all, as an engineer, I can't avoid saying something about the piers and marine structures, but it is important because in these kinds of waterfronts, your supported marine structures, your piers and wharfs and seawall repairs and so on, are by far the largest capital expenditure. And so efficiency and, again, longevity and dealing with the very real corrosion issues that are associated with these kinds of structures is very important, and long life is what matters. And in the case of Hudson River Park, of course, we didn't have it easy geotechnically. Nature didn't treat us well. There's a great variation in depth to rock. As you can see by those piles, as it happens, all those piles have been driven to rock, but that reflects the differences within very short distances. And above the rock, there is very poor soil indeed. So in nearly all cases, we had to drive piles to rock. So the decision was made to go to high-quality precast concrete piles that are not likely to deteriorate as easily as steel in that critical zone where the tide is moving and the water is getting alternatively wet and dry in a salt environment. And just to remind ourselves that piles do corrode, and there has been a great deal of corrosion and collapse of the old structures. I mentioned the marine borers on the timber piles when I started out, but a number of them are steel piles that also exhibit problems. So what we came up with for the piles that were very long, and let me say that some of these piles are as long as 300 meters, what we came up with was a detail, a hybrid pile really, where a very good quality concrete, precast concrete pile is the upper 20 meters or so, where you need the strength and stiffness and corrosion resistance, and then a much more economical solution below that by attaching a steel section as shown there, and that shows the kind of connection to it. So that's the piling. Talking of some of the other details, obviously various kinds of seating details, telescopes to take advantage of the view, the railing, which was a very important element, all 8 kilometers of park, plus the boundaries to all the piers. The railing was selected as a stainless steel element, where the feature there that has the LED light on top of it is in fact a casting, which happened to be, as it turned out, was cast in China, and that railing repeats throughout. And even with that stainless steel, it requires a coating not to stain brown in the environment that we're dealing with. So that's Hudson River Park. I now want to move on to East River Waterfront just to give you a glimpse of something that's quite different. This shows some of the railing and bench details. That's one version of a whole family of benches and seating elements. You can see the railing there, the subtlety of moving from a thin rail to quite a wide rail on the top, so that you could sit on the bench with your computer and your coffee and look out on the water and so on. The real driving element of East River Waterfront is very different from Hudson River Park. The driving element is that it is adjacent to and mostly under the shadow of the FDR Drive, which is terribly noisy, carries a lot of traffic. We investigated various ways of trying to reduce the noise, and it's almost impossible without spending an enormous amount. So one of the features you see there in embracing the issue of the FDR Drive is that lilac-painted girder of the structure, which will be illuminated and will create a continuous 3-kilometer line of light that will be visible from across the water, and I guess even from aircraft flying in, and will be a feature of the park. But this is a case of dealing with the realities of adversity, a structure that covers so much of the area other than the overwater structures that you have to really be intensive with your planting where you can have plants, because most of it is in shade. One of the features, little pavilions that will be let out as concessions at various situations. There you can see a model of one of the pavilions under the drive. We got permission to be able to, within certain height constraints, to be able to build these pavilions under the driveway. And this is in the foreground, the esplanade, the new esplanade that's being put in. A lot of this is not built yet, so I'm showing you architects' impressions by courtesy of the architects, who in this case are Shop. I should say that the master plan was done by Richard Rogers' firm in association with Shop before we became involved, and Simon mentioned that earlier when he was talking. This is Pier 15, which is nearly complete now, and in fact 2 of these portions of the park will be opened this year to the public. But it's a two-level pier and has a lot of really interesting features associated with it, including a couple of little concession buildings, like one that will celebrate model ships and vessels and so on. The same model of the same structure at night. I show this feature because you can see in the background there the pier structure already complete, although the superstructure isn't in, but I also wanted you to see that it is right within sight of the wonderful Brooklyn Bridge. So it really, this part of the park has a wonderful situation looking across the water towards Brooklyn. Some of that work under construction. A feature of the, as it were, underbelly of the upper level where the lighting will come through these slats. Some more of the lighting that I mentioned on the painted girder. And under sustainability, another issue that we were interested in was water conservation and making use of runoff. And so this is a water harvesting scheme that we've introduced into East River, where we actually take the water off the FDR drive from the downspouts and put it into effectively a plastic tank under the esplanade, treat it and can use it for irrigation and various other non-potable needs. And then my last feature is Pier 35, which is not under construction yet, but there we're making use of an existing pier to create that green effect. There is in fact a vegetative wall on which a variety of plants will grow to a height of 10 meters. It's a 10-meter structure supporting it. And of course that will have all different shades depending on the time of year. And in the foreground here, you can see that there is in fact a little eco park with a bridge over it, which will allow the tide to come in, and being a sloping floor to that, it will be able to have mussel beds and have creatures growing in it that will be quite a cool addition to the park. So, Chairman, I think I've nearly not overrun, and so that's what we hope Pier 35 will look like in something over a year or two. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you very much.